University campuses have always been an important place for debate and discussion, but more recently, fueled by a highly divisive political culture, both online and offline, these debates seem to have taken on a life of their own. One recent debate is the controversy surrounding Professor Jordan Peterson and his comments on Bill C-16 and gender-neutral pronouns.
There's some things to talk about here, and I started to try to talk about them, and I would say that my freedom to do so was rapidly infringed upon. My career was put at risk, and I find this absolutely unacceptable.
Peterson, a professor in the Department of Psychology at U of T, denounced what he views as a culture of stifling political correctness on university campuses in a series of YouTube videos.
Calls for my discipline and silencing have begun in earnest.
Bill C-16 is an act introduced to Parliament in May of last year that seeks to add gender identity and expression as a prohibited grounds of discrimination in the Canadian Human Rights Code and Criminal Code. Peterson argues that this law would force professors like him to use gender-neutral pronouns in the classroom, which he views as an infringement of his right to free speech. Peterson's videos gained a great deal of attention online, both from free speech advocates and transgender, non-binary, and intersex student advocates. This culminated in an October 11th rally in support of free speech on campus, with a large crowd of protesters, counter-protesters, and observers gathering in front of U of T's Sidney Smith Hall. I talked to proponents on both sides of this issue to try and get a better understanding of this debate and the larger political issues it has come to represent. Calix Zhang, Martin Schusterman, and Jeffrey Liu are three of the executive members of Students in Support of Free Speech, the group that organized the October 11th rally.
This group is about bringing together a wide coalition of people to support the notion that free speech is important in our society and civil discourse is the paramount value. Really, it's a meeting place of people who want to promote an open dialogue.
A professor was told by the university to stop criticizing legislation, and that, to me, it's pretty scary if an institution says, okay, you cannot question the government.
SSFS claims that they created their group in response to a climate of fear they felt was being promoted on campus, leaving individual students and professors too afraid to voice their opinions publicly. Could you speak more about this idea of fear, the fear of speaking out?
Something as simple as maybe one person shares an article questioning whether or not the wage gap is accurate or is supported by evidence, and then they see that 7 of their friends unfriend them on Facebook right away.
When you speak about a vulnerable community such as the transgender community, there are obviously a lot of controversial and contentious ideas that need to be dealt with. If you're not in keeping with a certain mainstream view, you would be immediately labeled as a bigot or a transphobe. Whereas we should really be discussing these things not with fear, but perhaps with tenderness and with empathy, but certainly it shouldn't be a situation of fear.
We all know that the internet is not a good place to have political discussions, but does this constitute an infringement on free speech?
The most compelling evidence is what happened at the rally. People came and they pulled out noise machines. Find something controversial. And they shouted.
You all have the ability to articulate.
It shouldn't have been a violent incident. It was very surprising that free speech became contentious.
On the other side of this debate are the individuals that make up the trans, non-binary, and intersex community on campus, who feel that Peterson and his supporters are using the issue of gender-neutral pronouns to discriminate against them. Kesser Ali, a member of INTACT, the Intersex, Non-Binary, and Transgender Action Coalition of Toronto, was also present at the October 11th rally.
We were concerned that this event, which was calling itself a rally in support of free speech, but seemed to be involving a lot of these same people, would be used as a platform to basically broadcast anti-trans, racist, homophobic hate speech to anyone who happened to be walking by Sidney Smith Hall.
The distinction between free speech and hate speech is a long debated issue. It is true, however, that not everyone present at the October 11th rally was interested in having a reasonable discussion.
Plenty of people in that crowd, even beyond the ones who we personally interacted with, who weren't there as part of a rally so much as they were there looking for a fight. That had been one of the serious concerns we had when we saw that the event was happening, was what sorts of people is this going to attract?
According to some reports, there were allegedly 6 documented assaults that occurred during the October 11th rally.
That's not something that I'm willing to do. Stop now.
An intense atmosphere of political hostility has been brewing online for some time now.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
The alt-right, an online movement of white supremacists and white nationalists, seems to have taken over many of these discussions.
The suspect in the Quebec City mosque attack is alleged to have expressed support for far-right ideologies.
Unfortunately, the Students in Support of Free Speech Facebook group has also served as a platform for these views. Professor Peterson himself has discussed the importance of the internet as a new form of communication. What he has not seemed to grasp, however, is the political battleground he stepped into, greatly underestimating the vitriol of the radical alt-right, while also overstating the impact of online so-called social justice warriors. What's more, Peterson has used his newfound internet fame for financial gain.
He's got a good sense for business because I checked today and his Patreon account is getting him over $16,000 a month now, a number that went up substantially after this controversy began, and which doesn't really show any sign of slowing down. The next fundraising goal is $20,000.
In fact, Peterson did reach his $20,000 per month funding goal. During the U of T debate, Professor Brenda Kostman, a Harvard-educated lawyer and director of the Mark S. Bonham Center for Sexual and Diversity Studies, showed quite clearly that Bill C-16 would not have the effect on free speech that Peterson claimed.
So let's start with Bill C-16, which passed third reading yesterday in the House. It's the proposed federal legislation that does 3 things. First, it adds gender identity and expression to the Canadian Human Rights Code. It will prevent the Canadian government, federal agencies, and businesses within federal jurisdiction, which are quite limited, banks, telecoms, airlines, from discriminating on the basis of gender identity and expression. Number 2, Bill C-16 adds gender identity and gender expression to provisions in the criminal code that define an identifiable group for the purposes of advocating genocide, the public incitement of hatred, and the willful promotion of hatred. So how might these provisions affect the use of pronouns? And do these provisions in any way criminalize the use or misuse of pronouns? Not even close. How bloody hard is it to simply treat these people with respect and dignity? Because all this is about, all human rights are about, is respect and dignity.
But of course, this debate was never just about Bill C-16, free speech, and transgender rights. It was about a tense political climate causing fear, unease, and suspicion on the left and right wing. As I spoke to individuals from both sides of this debate, I couldn't help but feel that they might actually get along quite well if they met each other in person, under different circumstances. Both sides, with enough prodding, stated that they knew that not everyone on the other side was as unreasonable or disingenuous as they first claimed.
I am certain that there are people in that group who, of course, are very concerned about free speech. I'm not meaning to imply that every single person in that group is transphobic or that every single person in that group is racist. What I am confident saying is that the aims of the group are and the views that they promote and the practical material things that they do in putting on events with Jordan Peterson, Ezra Levant, and other people like this, is that they are promoting and furthering the movements against racial equality, against equality for women, against equality for queer and trans people.
It would also seem that not all social justice warriors would be against free speech. They're primarily interested in identity politics and the idea that there's a culture of victims and perpetrators, and social justice seeks to rectify that inequality. And certain social justice warriors would want to accomplish their means by saying that certain groups of people or certain opinions are not acceptable. These are not the correct opinions to have. And those would be the people that we would have an issue with, but there probably are very many social justice warriors that believe that identity politics is very important, that there's perpetrator and victim, but that you do not need to curtail freedom of speech in order to rectify these injustices.
However, both sides were also reluctant to denounce their most radical members. Radicalism, the thinking seems to go, is what is necessary to be heard. For all of Dr. Peterson's concerns over the decline of reasoned debate and discussion, it's ironic that his comments have actually had the opposite effect, making it even harder for students to interact with each other.